I got new bolt-on performance for the G8 V6, and I'm going to try it out. Now what I got came from Australia, from Mace Performance, and that is these manifold insulators, or spacers, whatever you call them. Now this is a 12 millimeter, pretty close to ½ inch, plastic, pretty simple. Now it did come with some gasket maker, but since I got new gaskets on the bottom that probably don't have but maybe 100 or 2 miles on it, well, I got some new gaskets on top for the spacer, so I'm going to have gaskets on top and bottom. Hopefully that seals well enough. Now they did recommend the gasket maker because they said the metal gaskets conduct heat still, which I'll leave the metal gasket on the bottom where it's at. This is a Felpro. They're not metal, so they'll go on top of the spacer, so it shouldn't conduct heat. Now, also came with new hardware, so we're good there. Now, these manifold insulators are supposed to keep the intake cooler, since unlike the other General Motors products, it does not have the composite intake. It actually has the aluminum intake, which is a heat insulator, and it absorbs the heat around it, so it does get pretty warm. And I've heard complaints about people driving, after a while, feel like they lost a little bit of power, probably due to the heat contracted through the aluminum. Now this is supposed to basically eliminate the heat from getting to it from the lower intake, so that may help a little bit. But also we're going to increase the runner length, so we have a little bit better low end torque as well. So you're at that heat and more low end torque. Now supposedly, I don't know which exact spacer they use, because there's actually a 23, 24 millimeter, close to ½ inch spacer. I didn't get that one. They said one of them, I don't know which one test they did on, but it gained 10% power basically. I'm going to assume that is the full size one, but anywhere probably 5 to 10% probably gained from this, which will be a good increase on that engine. So the test I'm going to do today is actually see if it does make the intake cooler. So I'm going to drive it around, take the temperature, and then basically wait for it to cool off so I can actually work on it a little bit. Check to see if these gaskets line up well enough to use the gaskets, and then install it and drive it around again. So I'm going to take it for a drive, come back, test it, or check the temperature of the intake in several locations. Alright, now here it is without this manifold insulator. So we're going to check the throttle body. Check right here at the V. The little fin right at the beginning. Look at that last bolt hole there if I can. Okay. Maybe right here. Okay. Same here. Okay. So now we have a pretty good rough estimate of what the temperature is of this intake. And yeah, that's hot to the touch for sure. Now do keep in mind I am not sponsored, but let's take a look at this. I was going to start using some gasket sealer on the back side of this, but as you can see, with it set in place, there's actually some edges here where I'm going to have to do some port work, or You guess you could call it port work, not really, but let's do some work. File these down just a little bit and gasket match them. Now, I did ask about that and didn't really get an answer, but looks like since I have my upper and lower intake port matched or gasket matched to each other with the gasket that's on there now, looks like I'm going to take a little bit of time, file some of these back real quick before I install them. But luckily it's still cooling down, so I got time. Alright, so everything's plugged up, everything's connected. Start it up and let it run for a second, get some heat back into it, and tighten down the intake bolts again just to make sure. I got the cold reader here, got my infrared gun ready. Now I'm going to take it on the same trip I did earlier without the spacer and see what happens. So I'm going to go about the same trip. Traffic may be a little different, so it may vary. But I'm going to go about the same distance and for about the same amount of time and see what happens. Alright, so you saw the results of the temperature. It is without a doubt that insulator is working extremely well. Now I did, like I said earlier, went ahead and gasket matched it just a little bit, because there wasn't too bad, but since my upper and lower is already gasket matched, I felt I needed to on that. So it's there, no engine lights, runs just fine. This drive took a little bit longer because I had to take a couple detours around a bunch of traffic, but obviously it was still cooler. It's kind of hard to tell it's even there unless you know what you're looking at. The gap right here between this part of the air box and the radiators a little bit larger. You can see between it now. The gap back there between the intake and the cowls a little bit shorter. But you know what? You can't hardly tell it's there. You can kind of tell the intake's sitting up a little bit. Honestly, that's probably where it should be anyway. It looks a lot better like that. So it does look better to me. Intake is cooler. And honestly, the reviews said on this exact spacer that it took about an hour of driving or so to feel a difference because the computer had to retune itself or something. I don't know how true that is, but I felt a noticeable difference of acceleration. So we got a little bit of low end torque, which is great. Now the claims of 10% horsepower gain was probably on their 23, 24, 25 millimeter. I forget what size it was. It's somewhere around an inch. This is a 12 millimeter. So I don't think I'm getting a 10% gain overall. If anything, I may get 5 to 8, which is still a decent amount. That could be around 12 to 15 horsepower, which is still not a bad gain at all for this engine being a V6. So I'll take those gains, even if they're small right now. But everything's there, runs, drives good. It does actually keep temperature down, which is good, so it's a win-win. I think I paid just a little bit under $100 with shipping for it. I did buy the extra intake manifold gaskets. I like that a lot better. I did put a little bit of the gasket maker on the gaskets just to ensure a good seal around with no leaks. So there it is. I'm actually using the metal one on the bottom on the lower intake, followed by the spacer, and then the new Felpro gaskets on top of that. So it worked out pretty well. It was a trick to get that last bolt in. The insulation under the cowl was actually falling, so I went ahead and cut some of it back, and once I did, I was able to get my hand and pry the cowl up just slightly, angle the bolt in, and drop it in, so I didn't have to do anything crazy. Now, if you go with the larger next size up, you will actually probably have to do something to the cowl, but this one, I was able to get it in there. But hey, I'm happy with it. And now, honestly, it should pair up well with the next few upgrades and maybe make a bigger difference. But that's for later, so stick around and keep watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode, and as always, thanks for watching.